Hey, deserving listeners, 90 Day Fiancé, let's watch.
He hurt both of you. I don't think he's going to change. I think that Vanessa's right. Stephen, you're not a freak or anything, but it's not fair to, have one foot in the door and one foot out the door.
That's great. Actually, Ariella has a good way of putting that. You're not a freak or anything. You want a threesome. That's fine. You're not a freak, but what you're doing is you have one foot out the door in single life where you're flirting and cheating and whatever, and another foot in the door of like you're a dedicated Mormon married monogamous guy. Like, it's not fair to Alina to have one foot out the door like that. Yeah, that's a good way. You're not a freak, but you probably shouldn't be married.
That's kind of funny coming from someone who just abandoned their husband.
I didn't abandon my husband. I went to get my son's surgery in the U.S.
Okay, so I think we've seen this before as well, that this sort of casual attacks that he'll do as a way of deflecting from his own responsibility. So I'm guessing Ariella must have really hit him where it hurts. Stumbled on a sensitive spot for him of just like calling him out. And if he were a good person and a wise person and a self-aware person, he'd be like, yeah, Ariella, I mean, you're kind of right. There's a part of me that I just wonder if I'm made for marriage. Maybe I got married too soon. I don't know. I just have all these impulses, and I don't know what to do with them. I'm going to a therapy. You don't have to hate yourself for what Ariella said, but that's not what he said. What he said, well, that's funny coming from you. It's like, well, even if it's true that she abandoned her husband, what is that? How is that relevant to what she just said?
I'm fully invested in
No, you're not.
Alina.
You're talking to 9 different women. You're not invested in anything.
So this reminds me of group therapy as a therapist. I didn't usually want confrontation to happen per se, like where I would corner someone. But in group therapy, we could almost consider Sean to be kind of like, she's not a therapist, but it's emulative of group therapy, what's happening right now. One of the reasons why you do group therapy is for moments like this, where 2 people will talk to each other in a way that you can't really talk to a client. Like, you, as a therapist, you wouldn't say to, a Stephen character, as Stephen starts to say, well, I'm really dedicated to marriage. In your head as a therapist, you might be like, I don't think you are. But the spontaneity and the freedom that other group members have to really just sort of lay it on the line, the way Ariella is doing, there's a potential therapeutic action from that can only be born out of group members being spontaneous together. And there's a whole theory around this, and I could go into a lot of detail. There's all sorts of transferences and triangulations, and there's a lot of things we can learn from these kinds of intense interactions in group therapy. But to see Sean's face, it reminds me of times when I've been in couples or in group therapy or even family therapy, where you see an interaction and you can just take a step back and you can sort of look and go, okay, let's see what happens here.
It was a fleeting moment of weakness.
9 fleeting moments of weakness?
Well, over a couple of days.
Over how many years? Because the same thing happened with her.
Yeah, Ariella is speaking truth to power right now. I mean, she is very concise. She's not flipping out, right? She's just, and I hope Alina is taking this in, because I think the way he delivers his, shtick to her, I think it's, as she puts it, confusing. But when you just look at the data, I'm very dedicated. No, you're not. You flirted with 9 women online. That's not dedicated. Well, so let's rewind this, because I'm really curious what he's going to say, because I think it'll say a lot about who he is in terms of how he's going to respond to this. And it also is telling the way he's responding to this. He has excuses, instead of saying, yeah, maybe I do have a problem. But let's rewind it.
A fleeting moment of weakness. Just
9 fleeting moments of weakness?
Well, over a couple of days.
Over how many years? Because the same thing happened with her. You had sex with 3 women in Russia. Please, I can't take the bull.
Alina and I, since then, have scheduled a meeting with a psychologist.
Okay, good. Maybe. Now, some people will be like, couples therapy? Why did he be like, he's the one who needs therapy? Yeah, I mean, you can address his issues in couples therapy for sure. And if Alina is there to say, well, he did this, he did, whereas if she's not there, he might leave out, Stephen might leave things out. So this is kind of encouraging. I don't think we've ever, aside from Ed, seen a cast member go to therapy for an extended period of time. So, good. They're going to a therapist. Hopefully it's going to address or get to the problem.
Because I do need help.
Alina, I want you to know that it's not a bad thing to leave him. You're not giving up. This is not what you agreed to.
So, yeah, he's going to a psychologist. What does that mean? And he says, I need help. Okay, a step forward. I'm guessing he's gonna have to dedicate himself to years of therapy to get to the bottom of all this, because I don't think this is just like a simple case of like a mild compulsion. I think he has some serious issues in terms of the way that he is. And so if you're Alina, given what I've heard, if I were Alina's friend, I'd be like, well, you're really in love with him, and we've seen some very horrible things, but he's willing to go to a therapist. Let's see how that works out. If he, for 12 straight months, goes every week and starts to change and really takes responsibility, and you see some improvement, then you can maybe hope that will continue. But if he goes to 1 session or just 5 or even 10 and doesn't really open up, doesn't really talk about something, then you maybe revisit this question as to whether or not you should be in it. But if I were her friend, I'd be like, well, there's a chance that this can work now that he's going to a therapist. Proof's in the pudding, so you're going to have to, just because he goes doesn't mean it's going to work, but maybe give it some time, and maybe it will get rid of this personality trait and compulsion so that you can actually have a good life.
And you in a relationship with a man who is going to take care of you and love you and put you first.
Well, thank you for taking care of me, everyone. But I just already decided that I'm going to give another chance, and that's going to be the last time.
Thank you, baby.
Ugh, there's just something about thank you, baby. Am I reading into something? I don't know. I think it's just in lieu of everything else, in light of everything else that he does when he does stuff like this. You're just like, huh? It's, what's the word for it? I mean, I'm sure some people would say it's creepy. I think it just lacks an awareness of the context, of just like turning to her and being like, You've put up with so much with me, and I'm so sorry. I have such I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't know if I should be married. I don't know if I have some kind of an addiction. I don't know what's going on. And so thank you so much for putting up with this and giving me another chance. Something like that, but just like, thank you. Anyway. But she's saying, thanks everyone for caring about me, but I've decided to give him one last chance. So, I think we can all respect that.
Going to walk away at some point in the future.
Even though I feel terrible,
Yeah.
I think those feelings of feeling like a terrible person will hopefully help me be less terrible.
Yeah, I do mistake. She did a mistake.
Okay, so he's saying he feels terrible, and he feels like a terrible person. This might be a situation similar to Ed, in which there's emerging self-awareness and vacillation between, I think I have a problem, to defensiveness that upholds the defensive structure that keeps the self-entitlement and harm to other people, lack of consideration of other people's feelings. perpetuated. So is that what we're looking at? Or is just another time in which he's trying to get people off their guard by claiming responsibility when in reality he's not, because he keeps doing it? Or does he have a legit compulsion and it's out of his control? Just because someone does something and doesn't say, hey, I have an addiction, I can't stop, there's something about this that I just cannot resist, my brain is different or something, I don't know what's going on with me, but I wake up in the morning and I'm like, I'm not going to do it, and then this building itch, you can have that experience and not, one, be aware of it, or two, know how to frame it or disclose it. So just because he doesn't talk about that doesn't mean it's not present. But when you engage in compulsive behavior, you kind of, sometimes you're a slave to your own compulsion and you start enabling it through your own perspective, and you might actually exhibit that, with your opinions and your defensiveness. For example, if you have a compulsion to use alcohol to self-medicate for trauma, you can become, and you can be kind of crushed by your own need to continue to drink in spite of a lot of negative consequences. And so your conscious mind has this choice of like, well, I can buck up against it and constantly suffer, or I can kind of give into it and adopt a certain mindset that sort of lets me off the hook. And so I'm going to make all these excuses. Well, I wouldn't drink if it weren't for my stressful husband or my stressful job or my stressful kids, or it's just a little bit of drinking. What's the big deal? And then when people ask you, wow, you drink a lot, you might say some of those things, even though you didn't really start off with that perspective. I don't know what's happening here, though. You let me know in the comments. Do you think he is on his way to getting better or not? I think that's a key question. Because it's one thing to make mistakes. It's another thing to indicate that you're going to continue doing it. Alina seems to be saying, look, I'm willing to forgive him for the things he's already done, but if things don't get better, then I'm going to leave him. That sounds like what she's saying. So it all hinges on, is he going to change? So what do you think?
Everybody's do a mistake,
Yeah, but I have a different opinion. I mean, I agree that you should learn from your mistake, but I think that if you're at the point where it's already so easy for you to hurt someone that you supposedly love, I mean, maybe you're not ready to be in a relationship.
Yeah, Ari has a lot of really intelligent. I mean, it's intelligent, but I guess what I'm saying is I agree with it, and that I'm labeling it intelligent. So I'm just saying I can relate to a lot of things she's saying. That she's saying, look, okay, maybe you can get better, but it's not like you just made a couple of mistakes. You've exhibited a constant personality trait or approach to Alina, or something about you led you to repeatedly do things that harm other people and is inconsiderate of other people in a very flagrant way. And these are only the things that you were caught about. So I don't see how you can turn that around very quickly. It's not a simple thing like, well, you make a mistake by forgetting to take the garbage out on garbage day to the street. You're like, oh, okay, I got to work on that. I got to set reminders. There's little adjustments that you make. But what Ari is saying is a possibility that you have a global personality, or you're not really in this relationship. There's so many indications that say you don't really even want to be with her. So, and you don't seem to be aware of that. So I don't think this is something that you can just like flip a switch and change.
Yeah, it is difficult.
I mean, if you get to a point where you realize that you aren't going to change anytime soon, maybe you just let her go.
Right. And become single and just date casually, and maybe adjust your Mormon faith to allow for that. I mean, I'm guessing there's got to be Mormons out there who aren't so strict about premarital sex or whatever. So, and still believe themselves to be following the faith. There are certainly Christians that are like that. And certainly, anyway, point is that if he just said, you know what, I think I've been an idiot this whole time. on one hand, I wanted to get married and have kids and start that life, but my impulses and my choices are clearly indicating otherwise. Another thing about this is that in religion, there's often this philosophy around constantly pushing back on the devil or temptation, and they will often frame things that way. So I wouldn't be surprised if when he goes to people in his community, in the LDS community, and he's talking about like, yeah, you know, I texted these people, I don't know what to do. And one, they lay out a Christian-based, forgiveness-based redemption path. And two, they frame it as, well, it's temptation. You have to resist the devil. You have to resist the temptation to follow your worldly impulses, instead of saying, maybe you're not ready for marriage. Did you ever think about that? You know, in some religious circles, that just isn't considered. It's not considered, well, maybe you just need to be in a lot of different relationships. You know, that doesn't usually get, promoted by religious people. So they could be misleading him by telling him that his impulses are the devil and you have to push back on it, or sin, or, impulse, you have to push back on it, instead of an indication of who you really are. And who is he really, right? So that's the question. Like, what I'm saying is like, and we won't know, we'll never know, but let's say he divorces and he's just like, I don't think I'm going to be ready, and maybe I'll never be ready for monogamy, but at least for the next 5 years, and I should stop telling women that I'm going to just be with them solely. I'll enter the polyamory world, or I'll just casually date, and I'll tell people right up front I'm not looking for anything committed. And if let's say he goes into that and he stops lying, he stops hurting other people, then we would have our answer. Whereas if he continued to lie and cheat and hurt people, then it wasn't a lifestyle incompatibility. It was a personality trait of harming others. Personality trait that results in harming others.
So that's when you got to just cut the out.
I felt humiliated today having to share as much as I did.
You can do it.
Thanks, Kenny. I think it's a good humiliation, though. I think it would bring about that contrite spirit that's needed to make real change. See ya, nice meeting you guys.
Yeah, so you hear that language he's using, I feel really humiliated today. It's good that he can just state it that way. If it were Angela, she wouldn't state it that way. She'd be like, it's a big ass, so he's able to just take it and just be, oh, that's pretty humiliating. Because, yeah, it's pretty humiliating to be seen for your behavior. But then he uses this phrase, I hope that I can't remember the exact phrase, it's something about the spirit, some kind of religious speak. And if that works for him, great. But I wonder if he's relying on prayer and, religious vigor to change his behavior. I don't think that's going to work. It can work for some people, but what I would be much more encouraged is I've got to go to therapy and figure out what's wrong with me, because I keep doing this over and over and over again. I keep dedicating myself to not do it, and then I keep doing it. So I don't know what's going on. I don't know if I don't understand something about myself. I don't understand. Maybe I'm making the wrong life choices. Like, I got to figure some stuff. I'd be much more encouraged if you said something like that. All right. Well, if you didn't know already, we have merch and a cameo, so you can get for holiday times a gift from the merch store, Teespring, below, and also cameos. A lot of times people want to do cameos during the holiday season, so it's a fun way for me to interact with y'all, to wish people happy birthday or Merry Christmas or something. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself, because you deserve it. You really, really do.